Hello and welcome to my dark little book nook. Today we will be doing something a little bit different to my usual content, which is usually a dive into fairy tales, folklore, etc. I signed up a few months ago to be an ARC reader for the wonderful Quill Crow Publishing House. Now, I'm not sponsored, I'm not paid, I am just enabled to give my 100% honest reviews of upcoming publications. So this first one is entitled The Quiet Stillness of Empty Houses by L.V. Russell. I'll open with the first paragraph because that's what had me hooked entirely from the start. Death was no stranger to Theodora Corvus. It had gathered at her cradle, whisper soft and unseen, to take her mother's cooling hand. Upon the eve of her 8th midsummer, beneath the old oaks near the lake, as the sun slipped behind the hills, Death also took her father's hand. Now, with that first paragraph, I was completely hooked. The wonderful gothic atmosphere had enveloped me like a cloak as I stepped into the world of Theodora, Cassius, and Ottiline, and I quite literally could not stop reading it until I had reached the end. It was one of those stories where you start it and you have to know what happens because your life can't continue until you've reached that last page. So our story begins with our main character, Theodora, living with her grandmother at Woodrow House, which is their manor home. And Woodrow House is a ruin of its former glory. Its walls are crumbling, it's covered in ivy, and most of the rooms are now disused and hold just the memory of things that have happened in them. Now, the character of Theodora, I was so happy to see, was not some wailing wallflower that can't meet a man without swooning dramatically and calling for smelling salts. She is wild, strong, independent, and she definitely knows her own mind. Now, she reminded me at times of echoes of Catherine Earnshaw from Wuthering Heights and Jane from Jane Eyre. Now, Theodora chooses to employ herself as a governess at the nearby Kingswood Manor, and this manor house is a pristine, white-walled, columned, elegant manor house. Everything you think a manor house should look like. Not one speck of paint was peeling, and not a speck of dust was allowed on any surface. It was perfection. However, this house's problems are all internal. I aren't going to elaborate on what happens within those walls because I'm hyper aware that I want to get the balancing act for this right, because what I usually review is things that have been out for hundreds of years and everybody knows the ending. So this is a little bit different, and I really don't want to spoil anything because if anybody had spoiled this for me, it wouldn't have had the same impact that it did. I would have liked to spend more time in Kingswood Manor to really flesh out the people and everything that was going on within those walls, but I get why it was gone through but not lingered upon because we had to get to the third house. But I would love another story. I think it's ripe for another story from the daughter of the household, Agatha's perspective, and which would deeper dive into what goes on in that house and the dynamic between all who resided in there. But what goes on in that house, which I will not elaborate on because spoilers, it does pave the way for Theodora's journey to Broken Oak Manor. Now, Broken Oak Manor is the third house that we come into contact with, and it is filled to the rafters with all kinds of mysteries and secrets and something hovering just that little bit out of reach. And we get to explore this house along with Theodora's perspective over the time that she is employed there. Now, this house reminded me of a mix between Shirley Jackson's Hill House and Charlotte Bronte's Thornfield Hall. It's just that perfect blend of a house with things happening just outside of your periphery. You know, like you put something down and when you come back to it, it's a few centimetres off where you put it. And you know it's moved, but you can't quite explain why. And it is in this house where we meet the wonderful but fragile Ottiline Thorne, who is the daughter of the house. And can I just say, these names are just chef's kiss. They're wonderful. I've never seen these names written down before, and they fit the world so well. I just love them. But getting back to it. So we meet the wonderful Ottiline Thorne and the extremely competent but enigmatic housekeeper, Ms. Rivers. And of course, the perfect blend of handsomeness, mysteriousness, and downright yearning, which is the Lord of the Manor, Cassius Thorne. Now, I really liked how this story was written. The pacing is just slow enough to build a perfectly spooky atmosphere without getting itself into a descriptive rut. As Stephen King is quoted, the road to hell is paved with adverbs. The central relationship dynamic between Theodora and Cassius is the perfect slow burn, and you really feel the emotions that these characters are going through. No matter what the emotion is, you feel like you're right there with them. But will Theodora and Cassius overcome the obstacles they face, and can their budding relationship survive the secrets of Broken Oak Manor? You'll have to read it to find out. We have no ending spoilers in this video. Now, on to criticism. My main gripe is that it ended too quickly for me. I know I said about it wasn't overly descriptive, but I did want more areas of the story fleshed out a bit more, just because I wanted to spend more time in that world, because it was built so perfectly. It was one of those stories that I think I started reading at like sort of evening time, and I just couldn't go to bed until I'd finished it. I had to know what happened in the end, and 3 a.m. is just a number on the clock anyway. So in conclusion, I cannot recommend this book enough, and although I received an advance review copy for free, for which I am very, very grateful, I have pre-ordered it from Amazon, and I will be including the link to that below. It's out in May, and for me, this book has a rating of 4.5 dark stars. I couldn't resist the pun, I really couldn't. And as always, drop a like, a comment, and a spooky little subscribe down there below if you liked this video. And let me know your thoughts. Would this be something that you would be interested in reading? Let me know down below. And as always, keep reading.